I believe that this week we will pass legislation that will become the most significant piece of anti-gun violence legislation Congress will have passed in 30 years.
FBI, open up!
And more importantly, it's a bipartisan breakthrough.
Yeah, politics is all one big ass blast.
And I'm glad to join my friend, Senator Cornyn, on the floor today to talk a little bit about the piece of legislation that our colleagues will be able to look at, hopefully in a matter of moments, and that this body will be able to consider this week. I want to thank Senator Cornyn, Senator Tillis, and Senator Sinema in particular.
What a bunch of a-holes.
This was a hard road to get to this compromise, but nothing worthwhile is easy.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
What's up, guys? How's everybody doing on this Monday night? Thank you for joining us for tonight's live stream. It's a special presentation tonight. We had our regular weekly stream just last night, but we've got a special guest on tonight. He couldn't join us last night. Brenden Boudreau is the director of Great Lakes Gun Rights. They are the state affiliate for the National Association for Gun Rights, who produced that clip we just saw. That was obviously released while the red flag bill was still in the U.S. Senate, and unfortunately now it has been signed into law, the worst anti-gun piece of national legislation that's been signed in, I think, at least decades. But Anyway, Brenden, thanks so much for joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about Great Lakes Gun Rights, the National Association for Gun Rights, and all the fine work that you guys have been doing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate you having me on. I'm the executive director and founder of Great Lakes Gun Rights. Great Lakes Gun Rights came into existence about 2015. It's a project of mine, along with my work at the National Association for Gun Rights, of which I am the director of field operations. I oversee state-level operations as we try to liberate gun rights across the country. Our number one issue is constitutional carry. When I started at NAGR, there were only 4 constitutional carry states. That was in 2014, and now we're up to 25 constitutional carry states. And constitutional carry, as you know, Adam, is just a simple idea that if you are legally able to own a handgun, you should be able to carry it concealed or openly without having to beg for government permission. It's not a radical idea, but of course, we have anti-gun forces in both the Republican and Democratic parties that are trying to stop us, but they're losing and we're winning. And as we saw with the Supreme Court last week, gun rights continues to advance, even though we had a stumbling in D.C. and the other in the legislative branch.
Right. And by the way, Daniel Lawless in the chat has corrected me. Welcome back, Brenden, because you have been on our show.
Yeah.
I think at least twice previously. So folks in the chat, by the way, welcome to everyone watching on Rumble and even YouTube as well. We had been pretty much off of YouTube for the last several months just because our videos kept getting flagged. We were apparently attacked for talking about the 2020 election, and we kept appealing those, and I guess, and every time just be one after the next, an older video would get flagged, and we get channel strikes, and then at some point we just gave up on it. But now we are getting back into the YouTube thing. So folks watching on YouTube or on Rumble, feel free to weigh in the comments. We're also watching people on Facebook. Hi, Jay. Hi, Stephen. Thank you guys for joining us tonight on short notice. And there's a lot to go over, the Supreme Court case, and then of course also this red flag bill and what we can do about all this. And I guess we should probably start with the Supreme Court case, just because, well, first of all, always good news before bad news, but also because unlike the red flag bill, there's a lot more to talk about on the latter with what we can do about it. Whereas in the Supreme Court case, I think the best thing is probably to hold the line. But I don't know if you want to give a brief summary of what the decision was, or I can pull it up. We've got it actually on screen.
Yeah, sure. I can give a good overview of it. Of course, it wasn't what I was hoping it to be. I was hoping the Supreme Court would correctly see that Americans have the inalienable right of self-defense, and that the issuing of a permit or requiring of a permit for concealed or open carry is a clear infringement on that right. But I'm a radical, and I don't always get my way when I want things. But regardless, what we got in this ruling was good news. This was a good step forward in the right to keep and bear arms and the restoration of the right to keep and bear arms. It's what we see from the court time and again is that usually the court is about a generation behind when it comes to what's actually happening in the states. When Heller was handed down, you still had a pile of states that had no issue, where they had no form of lawful carry allowed. And now you have May issue is now now they're basically out of existence, or they're slowly fading out of existence. Which May issue, of course, for anyone's not aware, it basically says that you can apply to get your right to carry back, and as long as you meet all the criteria, the government agents may give you your rights back. It depends on if they like you or not. Of course, a lot of the May issue laws have Jim Crow era beginnings, as it was just a means to prevent freed slaves from arming themselves. So as the gun rights movement has continued to mature, from May issue to shall issue, where it says if you meet all the requirements, you shall be given your permit. But now we're up to 25 states that have passed constitutional carry laws that say the permit is not required. These states, but for Vermont, still issue permits for reciprocity because of the hodgepodge that we have across this country. But now half the states in this country now require no permit to carry openly or concealed. So that's where we see the court is as a generation behind, because the court has struck down May issue laws. So states like New York and New Jersey, and actually we saw the Attorney General's office of New Jersey issue a memo basically recognizing what the court had said. You're still going to get some funny business from some states that are going to try to wiggle around the court's ruling and still make it as difficult as possible to carry legally. But the other side of the court decision that was really good is that the majority opinion really emphasized that when reading cases dealing with the Second Amendment, you have to go with the plain language of the Second Amendment. There's legal minds who can talk about this more, but there's always this balancing test that's talked about when lower courts will make rulings on Second Amendment cases, and what the justices clearly said, no, you have to go with the plain language of the amendment. And so what that does, and what our legal foundation, the National Foundation for Gun Rights, has said, that basically this sets the table for another smorgasbord of litigation, where, Lord willing, some good cases get sent up from the states through the Court of Appeals that go to the Supreme Courts, where we can hopefully strike down more of these onerous restrictions. Of course, at the same time, we do need to be striking down through legislative means these unconstitutional laws, but also it's a two-pronged attack. You try to repeal bad laws, and then you also try to get bad laws struck down by the courts. And this ruling, albeit it did not go as far as I think all of us would have liked, it gives us a good stepping stone for more good things.
Yeah, I think one of the big things about this is that the court recognized that the Second Amendment is not on any lesser footing than the other amendments in the Bill of Rights. And in particular, with respect to the First Amendment, the courts have been clear for a very long time that because of the essential nature of the right to free speech, that infringements on that have to be held to a strict scrutiny standard, which is the most rigorous standard that prevents infringement. And the Second Amendment should be entitled to no less. And the government shouldn't be able to not to just show that there's a good public policy interest that they may perceive there to be, right or wrong, but that they have to have, it has to be the least restrictive possible. There has to be alternatives. These are all things that, states like New York simply did not allow. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of litigation in this Michigan is not so advanced as to have constitutional carry yet, but we certainly don't have the problems that New York had, where what this case originally turned on was that you were just not allowed to carry outside your home with or without concealing it. By the way, Reggie in the chat on YouTube says, hope John Gibbs' name comes up tonight. Peter Meyer has to go. Don't worry, Reggie, it will. Mark Kerniel says, the opinion made a mistake on the meaning of a well-regulated militia, in my opinion. Let me see if I can find what you're referring to, but Mark, feel free to elaborate in the chat with what you mean by that. I only see it listed once in the opinion here, and it looks like, oh, this is in the dissent, so that probably wouldn't apply. So Mark, let me know if you want to elaborate on that. I would just say to that, though, I think there's an important point to be made about this well-regulated militia, because you always hear left-wing attorneys like Alan Dershowitz say that Second Amendment supporters ignore that whole subordinate clause in the sentence and go on to say, oh, well, the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed, but they're talking about the militia, and that's where this should only apply to. And I think that's a completely incorrect historical analysis of what that clause means. Because as I take it, and again, I'm not a judge, but this is the way I would think a court should read it, is that in the context of the founding, the militia was what they needed to be able to raise a citizen's army, and therefore it meant that the members of the population had to be armed. They had to have access to firearms. So the notion of having a well-regulated militia, to me, even before the 14th Amendment extended the protections of the Constitution to the people from the state as well as from the federal government, that there in the Second Amendment was to say this is something that can't be subordinated by, or can't be overturned by state law. Every state has to be able to produce militia. Therefore, the right of the people to bear arms cannot be infringed upon by any state. I think it expands the right to bear arms, not to restrict it.
Well, and even the term well-regulated, you'd have to look at it in the context of the original language. Regulated, of course, has become a synonymous with bad things. Regulated, well-regulated, well-regulated. Wow, that's a tongue twister. Well-regulated was meant to keep regular. Right. It wasn't meant to regulate, meant to put strictures on or prohibitions on. It was meant to keep regular, to make sure that it was at ready. That's again one of those twists of words where the meaning of words no longer actually have meaning. It just keeps morphing until, and that's why it's important to look at the Constitution in its original context.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree the decision could have been stronger. We were talking last night about the Roe decision, and I was talking to someone in chat about this and how, a lot of people on the pro-life side try to mitigate the reality of the decision by saying, well, this just kicks it back to the states. And yeah, but if you're pro-life, that's not something you necessarily want either. I mean, if you think about it, the court could have said, but didn't say. And, maybe, certainly the Supreme Court justices are a lot smarter than I am, but either they didn't think of this or chose not to do it intentionally. They could have said, you know what? When the Roe decision was made 50 years ago, we told that court told the lawmakers in that decision that we, the court, can't decide when life begins. So therefore, we'll just invent this right to privacy. But they never, they almost told the legislature, you need to define when life begins. Well, here we are 50 years later. Nobody ever did. So tell you what, until the lawmakers define when life begins, we will. It starts at conception. That would remove all this talk happening now about people can just travel across state lines to get their abortions now. They can just vacation to pro-abortion states. Well, if that thing inside you is a living baby with rights, then you can't do that either. Court didn't do that. And you know what? In for a penny, in for a pound, maybe they should have. And maybe they should have done that here too. Because, to me, this is a step in the right direction. But it's almost frustrating to see conservatives on both of these issues say, hooray, we won, let's go home. That's not the attitude the anti-gun people have, folks. You think when Sarah Brady got the Brady Law passed, she was like, okay, we won, let's call it a day. No, they're like, this is the first step. Yeah. We're not done. We're in forever.
It's not that we want to take away from the momentous occasion that these rulings had. They are good, but we should never be satisfied. We should not be satisfied with the fact that we've lost our rights in so many ways over the last 100 years. especially on the gun rights issue. You're talking about, most of Michigan's gun control laws passed in the 1920s and 30s, and it's been slowly curtailing those back. Yet Michigan is still very backwards when compared to most of the nation now. Michigan is in the lower tiers when it comes to respecting the right to keep and bear arms. So yeah, I'm not satisfied with a lesser ruling, and until we fully have our rights restored.
Yeah, but all that being said, of course, there's not a whole lot we can do to compel the Supreme Court to do anything. It's really a matter of who's in the White House that appoints these justices. But what we can do, and I think part of the reason why, both of our organizations really always try to keep our focus on the legislature is that's where we do have the impact. And that's where there's a lot more that we can do. So with that, I think we should maybe talk a little bit about this red flag law that Congress just passed, which, it does a lot of things, but the biggest, I think, is incentivizing the states to pass red flag legislation, and they do it financially. We were looking at some of the bills coming up this week, and there was one bill, it was really stupid. It was to fund, I think it was to fund social worker training or mental health, something or other. It was federal money. And I've seen when these bills come up in the legislature, when it's federal dollars, they're like, well, let's just pass it because it's federal money. Mm-hmm. If we don't pass it, then we're just leaving the money on the table. Yep. And it's really easy for these rhinos to vote yes on it when they see it that way. They're like, oh, well, this is going to make some of my constituents happy, and the rest won't have to care because it's money they don't get to get back anyway.
Yeah, and since you had a pile of Republicans voting for it and negotiated for it and providing cover for it, there are going to be Republicans who say, well, there's plenty of due process in this, that they said supposedly that they're going to guarantee that the only red flag laws that are going to pass are going to have due process or proper due process in that, which every single state that has passed due process or that has passed red flag laws, I call them due process shredding gun confiscation.
They are.
They are. No matter how you look at a red flag law, the very purpose of a red flag law is to take guns away from people before they get a chance to do the thing, whatever the thing is. And by definition, that is a violation of due process because there are hearings being held without them being present. They are not getting to defend themselves, and they don't even get to see who their accusers are. And yet there's secret hearings being held, and then next thing you know, law enforcement's showing up to take guns away from lawfully people who legally are owning these firearms. And it's a bad situation for law enforcement. I've spoken to law enforcement officials and say that this is a nightmare situation because who wants to go to a supposedly crazy guy's house to collect his guns in the middle of the night or in the middle of the morning? Right. And of course, this is the politicians who are yet again putting the law enforcement in a bad situation. It's the politicians who are putting them in these bad situations. So there's no way to make a due process, a red flag law that protects due process.
Yeah. And they're sending the money to these states that have already passed red flag laws, which are almost categorically blue states.
Yeah.
And they're incentivizing every other state to pass this too, which, let me remind everybody, Senator Mike Shirkey, the majority leader, just a few months ago was promising to give Democratic Senator Rosemary Bayer the hearing on her red flag bill until we jumped up and screamed about it, and hasn't gotten its hearing yet, but we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a nice post. We put this on our Twitter page the other day. This is a really funny one. This is from the Firearms Policy Coalition, how red flag laws kill peaceable people. And this is essentially the essence of it. Anybody sees something you post online, reports it to some law enforcement agency. There's no trial. There's no due process. It's an ex parte hearing, which means you don't even know about it. You can't defend yourself. You don't have a lawyer representing you. They take your guns away, which can have drastic consequences depending on how they serve this warrant on you, which is where the infographic there leaves off. But it's actually a lot worse than that, because getting your firearms back, anyone isn't familiar with the legal system. Nothing happens quickly. Nothing happens affordably, and you don't get your money back when you win.
Well, and even in the bill that Congress passed, they don't even provide legal legal representation for you. So you're going to
Right.
have to foot the bill for yourself. Yeah, so then you have to go before the courts to explain why you're not this person that they've, painted you to be. And in some states, it can actually become a NICS prohibitor, where you get added to the NICS prohibited persons list for life. For anyone who didn't remember or didn't know, during the Obama years, the Obama administration shut down the appeals process for NICS denials. Now, keep in mind,
Mm.
over 90% of all NICS denials are false positives. This is why the National Association for Gun Rights and Great Lakes Gun Rights rejects NICS, because it violates due process. And it's a horribly flawed system. We aren't with the NRA on it. We don't want to fix NICS. We want to get rid of NICS because it's a serious problem. When you have
Yeah.
90% of all denials being false positives, that means somebody who should have their rights getting their rights denied. It's impossible for them to get their rights back. And then for the people who are actually trying to go buy guns illegally through a federal background check system, you're talking about single digit percentage that are actually being prosecuted. So
Yeah.
it's nothing but it's a dragnet system that's just collecting people's names into a federal database that they say, well, we're not keeping permanently, but they
Yeah.
are. It's the foundation for a registration scheme.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out. I mean, the NRA has been wrong about just about every important gun rights issue when the time comes. I remember just a week or so ago when the NRA put out their opposition to the Senate bill. It complained about a few of the smaller items in it here and there, but they didn't even say anything about the red flag thing.
Yeah, well,
which is one of the big ones.
And on that too, Adam, they finally came out and opposed the red flag stuff, but it also came out that they were negotiating to get stuff added to it, and then they said, well, we still oppose the bill.
Yeah.
And what they did is they put lipstick on the pig. They gave Republicans cover to vote for it, and they're going to score these Republicans down. They're going to downgrade them. But then, as I saw in Florida, when Florida passed red flag, mandatory waiting periods, raising the age to purchase long guns, the NRA found a couple more reasons to grade on a curve to inflate the grades of Republicans. There are 67 Republicans who were A-rated by the NRA who voted for that gun control package in 2018. And of course, Rick Scott was A+ A-rated governor of Florida at the time. And they all voted for gun control, and they were dinged down to Bs. And then the NRA bumped them back up to like A- or something like that after two more votes that had little bearing on the future of gun rights in Florida.
Yeah, the NRA also, they had to be dragged kicking and screaming into opposing right to carry, constitutional carry, probably in part because they have a lot of affiliates that are involved in these CPL classes and everything else. By the way, Reggie says, does the NRA have insurance advertisers that sell insurance for that, or is it just liability coverage? Reggie and Brenden, feel free to weigh in if you like. I'm not too familiar with all of the different programs out there that I think technically can't call themselves insurance, but if what you're talking about is you can enroll in a program, you pay a monthly fee, and then if you're charged with some kind of gun-related crime, they will take care of your legal expenses. You have to really, really read the fine print on these agreements. Some of them will actually provide the attorneys up front for you. Others will only pay your legal expenses after you prevail in court, which often by then you're already broke. You may have been unable to defend yourself because you couldn't afford the amount of legal representation it takes to win a gun case. So if you want more information about that, I would say check out lawofselfdefense.com. I know he's very active on YouTube and talks occasionally about the difference between CCW SAFE versus USCCA, and there's other programs out there. So if you get involved in those, then that's probably a good idea too, but make sure you really check the fine print on those things. So I don't know if you have anything you want to add to Brenden about that, but anyway, yeah, I mean, the other thing too about this, a lot of people think this kind of stuff can't happen to me. Because you imagine, well, who's going to rat on you to the authorities and say you're not safe to own a firearm? And the thing that first comes to mind is, dejected ex-partners, things like that, people like that. And someone thinks, well, I have a happy family. I have a stable job. I'm self-employed. Everybody likes me. It's not going to happen to me. And That may have once been the case, folks, but you have to remember the political environment we're all in today. This bill, this law, is intended to empower the left to wage war on patriots. And everything that you post on the internet can be used against you. And you might not have that peaceful, quiet life you think you have if you take your social media accounts into consideration and some of the people that you guys like to argue with on the internet, because they can use these against you. And you may have a left-wing prosecutor, a left-wing judge, and you're going to have a fight of your life just to be able to get your right to bear arms back. And a lot of ugly things can happen in the interim. And I think with that, I want to bring up this case. And of course, we've talked about Lucas Gerhard's case a lot on this channel, but I'm going to bring it up again because it's that important and the trial is coming up. So if you folks haven't already heard about this, I've been involved in this case from the get-go. Lucas Gerhard was a conservative college student at Lake Superior State University. And in 2019, after saving up the whole summer to be able to purchase his own firearm, he bought an AR-15, posted a joke among his friends on a Snapchat group saying, taking this bad boy up, this ought to melt some snowflakes, eh? And by snowflakes, I mean snow. Now, we still don't have a red flag law in Michigan, but what happened was a left-wing activist who hated Lucas Gerhard for his politics told the police that he had made this post and that it was a terror threat. And the police referred it to the county prosecutor, who threw Lucas in jail and charged him with making a terrorist threat, which is a 20-year felony in this state. He spent 83 days in jail, denied bail. He was finally bail was set at $250,000 that his family had to pay, and able to pay 10% for the bond. And he's been locked under house arrest ever since, nearly 3 years now. And in the course of that, it's been an absolute mountain of legal fees. You can see how much we've raised for him. He owes them a lot more than that. He spent more than that already. The damage this has done to him, he was denied the right to use the internet, even to go to school, even to go to work. He's had 3 years of his life taken from him. And on July 11th, he's going to finally get his day in court. Although he shouldn't have even had to take it this far. He actually appealed to the Michigan Court of Appeals that all of the evidence that was laid out in his case was that this was an absolute protected exercise of his First Amendment rights. And nonetheless, the Court of Appeals did the wrong thing. 0-3 ruled against Lucas and established a new standard of guilt in these kind of situations. That, according to the Court of Appeals, you have to prove that there's no possible way you were guilty of making a statement that could be subjectively interpreted by any left-wing nutcase to be a threat. It was, as his attorneys pointed out in their appeal to the state Supreme Court, an impossibility of guilt standard, something that does not exist anywhere in law. And that's now the current law in Michigan. Because just before the Supreme Court was going to take up his appeal, the Oxford shooting happened, and they chickened out. And so, as of now, that is still the precedent that the Court of Appeals has set. If someone accuses you of making what they consider to be a threat, reasonable or not, they can throw you in jail, destroy your life, drag you before the court, bankrupt you in lawyers' fees, and then maybe years later you get justice. When we're praying for Lucas, we're doing everything we can to help him with this case. And then maybe after he wins, maybe you'll be able to sue for damages against the county and the school that failed him and infringed upon his First Amendment rights. So, a couple of points here, though. And going back to the red flag stuff, I mean, these cases should be challenged. And maybe that's going to be the next step in litigation, because these red flag laws are infringing upon how many constitutional rights? I mean, I count 7.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
Second Amendment, obviously. First Amendment, because we just saw anything you say constitutionally protected can be used against you. Fourth Amendment, right, freedom from search and seizure. Fifth Amendment, due process. Sixth Amendment is the right to a speedy trial, and the Seventh Amendment is the right to trial itself. All of those, all the due process amendments are gone, plus speech, plus guns.
Yep.
No, it's really horrendous. So we are going to be covering the Lucas Gerhard trial, which is coming up in just 2 weeks, folks. So I'm looking forward to it. And I've got a favor I want to ask everybody, besides just, of course, supporting Lucas. If you want to support him, this is his GoFundMe. I will now have to give my mandatory disclaimer about GoFundMe, folks, because I know how a lot of you feel about GoFundMe. We started this before the Kyle Rittenhouse trial happened, which of course was the self-defense case where he was found not guilty. But in the meantime, GoFundMe shut down his legal defense fund, which should probably also be illegal, but that's what happened. And then, of course, the Canadian truckers, they once again refused to allow them to raise money for their defense on their platform. So I know you guys all hate GoFundMe. We can't switch to Give, Send, Go now, because if we did, we'd have to reset that counter to 0. It would be discouraging to people. It wouldn't look good. So I know you hate to give through GoFundMe, but if you don't donate to Lucas because of GoFundMe, you're hurting him more than you're hurting GoFundMe. So please, just this one more time, if you can support Lucas, support him today. He needs all the legal defense he can. It really is important. So you can give to his cause there. And one more thing, I also want to point this out, and I don't want to get into too many details because the case is pending, but there is a lot of ugly things that are going to come out of this trial. And we want the public to be able to see this. If you've seen what happened with the Kyle Rittenhouse case, how critical it was that there was cameras in that courtroom live streaming the proceedings so that people who had been told all of these lies in the mass media could see for themselves firsthand how, by the way, Jane Locke says, why not 2 funds? It would just be too confusing for people, Jane. I mean, if you want to give Lucas funds directly, I mean, I can refer you to his attorney. In fact, I'll do that right now because I'm going to get to that in a second. We want there to be cameras in the courtroom. We're supposed to have that right to have the proceedings broadcast. So there is a form. We're asking everybody to fill out this form. And you can see it on our website here. This is the link, rescuemichigan.com/MC27completed.pdf. This is the form to request film and electronic media coverage for the court proceedings. You want to film it, you want to fill it out just like this. There's the court address, there's the prosecutor's address, there's the defendant's attorney's address. So if you want to send support directly to Lucas, that's the attorney's address. You can send a check to them at that address. But these are the boxes to fill out. You don't need to put down a firm name. You can just put down your own name, your own number, the date, and then you need to mail it, preferably overnight, to the court at this address. You need to contact the attorneys by ordinary mail or probably preferably by telephone. There's their phone numbers there, notifying them you've submitted a request for the trial of Lucas Gerhard to be broadcast. So that's the form to fill out right there. Jane Locke says Rachel Mercero, or Mercero, I'm not sure you pronounce her last name, from Us Against Media is covering this trial. Well, they're going to try, and we hope they will. But, you know, the judge is not supposed to allow them to, the judge is not supposed to be allowed to prohibit that. But, I mean, knowing what the judge has done to Lucas already, we're concerned about this. So we want to demonstrate how many people want to see this trial and that have the right to. Because at some point, if a court can't allow the public to see a trial because too many people want to see it, then they've got a problem. So here it says here, Supreme Court Administrative Order 1989-1 requires the request be honored unless the trial judge exercises discretion, which means he has to have some reason to terminate, suspend, limit, or exclude the coverage. So your support in this matter will help too. We want as many people supporting Lucas who support open public trials to complete this form. Stephen Gulsey says, I missed that. Who do you need to contact that you filed this? It's on the form, Stephen. You can find the form at this address. You send it to the court and you send copies to the attorneys, or you notify them by phone. And the attorneys' phone numbers and addresses are there on this completed form already. So there you go. That's what you can do. And I know there's going to be some live streamers much larger than us who are very interested in covering this trial too. And that's going to be so important, folks, because that's going to help raise more support for Lucas's legal defense. The way we've been able to raise $90,000 for him is with the help of independent media covering this story. People like Gateway Pundit, people like 100% Fed Up, Ricada Law, Uncle Sam's Misguided Children. I'm sure there's more out there. But the more interest we can put on this case, because this case spotlights everything, folks. The red flag legislation, the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, cancel culture, the weaponization of the justice system. It's all in this case. And it's in a case where the defendant is as innocent as any defendant has ever been. And that's important too, because some cases have murky issues with some of their defendants. Lucas was an Eagle Scout. So this is going to be an extremely, extremely important case moving forward. And I hope you guys share Lucas's story, support him as much as you can, petition the court to have those cameras in that courtroom so the public can see what this system has done to Lucas and what they will do to anybody else if they could. So thanks for indulging me on that rant, Brenden. But,
yeah. No, it's important stuff.
And you guys have helped a lot too. I know you, and also why is his last, Tom Lambert from Michigan Open Carry helped refer us to Lucas's attorneys, who have been extremely effective. And you guys have done a lot for Lucas as well. So thanks to you guys also so much for all that you've done to support Lucas's cause. We really do appreciate it. Anyway, so now getting back to this red flag stuff, there's one more little bit of unfinished business we have here, and that is holding these politicians accountable. Because we have
part.
Yeah, same here. We have 15 Republicans in the U.S. Senate who voted for it. Of course, our Democrats did as well. All of the Democrats always do. And hopefully we'll hold them accountable when that time comes in 2024 and 2026 for this and many other things. But in the meantime, though, we have these two U.S. representatives who, despite not even needing their vote, because the Democrats are going to ram it through anyway. Yeah. But Fred Upton and Peter Meyer both voted for this thing as well. Upton, thankfully, the Michigan Redistricting Commission did us a great service by gerrymandering him into Mark Heisinga's seat, and I think partly because of his impeachment vote.
Bill Heisinga, not Mark.
Bill Heisinga, right? Sorry, I get him mixed up. Yeah, Bill's the congressman, Mark's now the state senator.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm sure he wants to be the next congressman too. But
yeah, everybody wants to be.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you know, from working in Lansing, as do I. Everybody in Lansing wishes they were in Washington. It's so pathetic.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, Upton's retiring, but Meyer is not. He is still fighting, and he is responsible both for the second impeachment of Donald Trump, which was another Bill of Rights issue, because all Trump ever did was ask people to go peacefully protest at the Capitol. He did not say riot. I accidentally might have said that, but I didn't mean it. The riot may have been what happened, but Trump did not direct it, and they never showed any evidence in that sham of a trial that they did. So, yeah, Reggie says, "Go, John Gibbs." Amen. Get rid of him. Hopefully, the Trump people are going to be involved in that race too, but I think we need to also be involved. We've been telling people, because we are going to be involved in some House races where there's a clear contrast between some of the candidates, but we have to be selective in which ones we go after races, because, you know, Michigan's a big state. And so we have to choose where to deploy our resources wisely. And we're not telling everyone we're going to be deploying them, because then opposition might hear about it, might plan accordingly. So we don't announce where we're going to strike. But we will say we're going to be working on holding Peter Meyer accountable, because every voter in that district, and some of them they don't know him. People in Ottawa County were not in the third before, and now they will be.
Yeah,
they need to know about Peter Meyer's record, and we need to make him a one and done congressman.
Well, we saw what happened with Congressman Ricestone in South Carolina. He voted to impeach Trump. He also voted for the gun control too. That was after he lost his primary. But you know what we see with Peter Meyer. You know, it's interesting. Literally 2 weeks ago, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, Peter Meyer's campaign reached out to the National Association for Gun Rights to get our candidate survey, which I think that was right after it was right after the South Carolina primary, actually. So the timing of it was kind of impeccable. That I think he read the writing on the wall. It's the same thing with Lynn Cheney. Lynn Cheney voted for it.
Yeah, you see, it's all the same people, though. I mean, the absolute worst rhinos.
Yeah,
Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger. Yep.
Lynn Cheney's now sending mail to to Democrats to get them to switch parties. And if you know anything about Wyoming, there's all but 10 Democrats in the state. So that's how desperate she is. And Peter Meyer now, I just don't get the guy. I mean, he feigns to be a conservative, and then he's given an opportunity to take a stance on the Second Amendment, where he can make sure that he doesn't get boxed out on the gun rights issue by John Gibbs.
He might have actually repaired his reputation a little bit.
He tripped over it. He fell right into it. And now he's left it wide open for organizations such as the National Association for Gun Rights and our Political Action Committee to take a close look at that race.
Good.
We owe it to our members in the 3rd Congressional District to let them know where Peter Meijer voted on that issue, and he needs to be held accountable for it, just like the Senate Republicans. 15 of them. You've got a good pile of them who are retiring. But here's what I want a good point I want to make about what happened, and why accountability is so important, and why the long game in politics is so important.
Sure.
Of the Republicans, the Senate Republicans who voted for the bill, only one is up for election this year. Lisa Murkowski up in Alaska.
Yep.
And so it's crucial for Alaskans, which I don't know why they didn't get rid of her back in 2010. I don't know. They just
she's been terrible on a whole wealth of issues.
Yeah, but she's just awful on all these issues. But then you have basically she's the only one that's up this year that voted for it. That tells you how popular this thing was. Is that it was either retiring senators or senators who don't have to face the voters until 2024 or 2026. And they're hoping that people are going to forget about it. And they're hoping and counting on the NRA to forget about it as well. And that's where, pro-gun Americans, and just, if you care about your constitutional rights, you have to not forget. And the organization I work for is already looking at that 2024 election cycle, that 2026 election cycle, looking down the road there, because the people who voted for those bills, the only way that we're going to stop Republicans from voting for gun control is if they pay politically for it. If some of them lose their primaries, some of them lose their generals. If a Republican who votes for gun control loses in a swing district, or in a swing state rather, and gets replaced by a Democrat for a cycle, on the gun rights issue, there really wasn't a difference anyways. I know that gets more complicated when you're talking about the balance of power, but I mean, the left does this all the time, where they are willing to sacrifice a moderate to a Republican for a cycle to then replace them with somebody more radical the next go around. And that's where we have to be willing to tell misbehaving Republicans on the gun issue, you name it, name the issue that you care about. If they're voting against you, and you can, with good conscience, vote against them, do it. Otherwise, you're basically rewarding a misbehaving child with a cookie. And that's what many of these politicians, they just assume, and that's what they do with, you name the conservative constituency. Republicans are infamous for this. This is what, all of it. I mean, here in Michigan, what Republicans have done to the gun rights community, I mean, we've been pushed to the back of the bus. They're not listening to the gun rights community. Virtually every Republican in Lansing has said they support constitutional carry, yet they're unwilling to take a vote on it.
Yeah, they're great at switching blame around, and I'm sorry, the chair is blocking it. I'm sorry, leadership's not going to do it.
Yeah, well, now's not the time. We need the majority. We need the governor. We need a super majority. That
reminds me, I want to get to your story also about this roll call vote, or attempted roll call that happened a couple weeks ago. But first, a couple of things. Folks on Rumble, I see there's some of you watching on Rumble. I may not have been seeing your chats if you were doing it earlier. Rumble is weird, doesn't integrate with my streaming software the way Facebook and YouTube do. I thought I had the stream pulled up because I was seeing us talking on it, but when I started before the stream started, I might not have seen. If you folks on Rumble are watching, you've got comments, if you've had any, please just repost them, because maybe then I'll see them. Also, a couple other quick things. Curtis Michael says Patriot approved, intends on having a report card, and we will not forget how they voted. Good for you.
Good.
Michael Nagy says, not to mention the Meijer grocery stores have no guns sign posted. Yeah, folks, that's another way that Meijer can be hit too, which a lot of politicians don't have. I remember, I think back in it was early 2021 when Meijer voted for impeaching Trump. We were telling our members, boycott Meijer and post that stuff on social media. Let the family company know the damage he's doing to their brand with this kind of garbage. Mm-hmm. That's another avenue you can go after him on. Jane Locke says Peter Meijer is a self-absorbed rhino that thinks he's entitled to be in Congress. Exactly right. He bought that seat just like a bunch of other rhinos. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way the system goes. Reggie says Liz Cheney is toast. Meyer is a total rhino. DeVos money. Hope not. I hope not as well, but we don't know. We'll see. The DeVosses have their hands full with a lot of things right now, though. So I don't know if they've got much to spare for him. I hope they don't have any. Let's see. Do we have any other comments here? Stephen Ghostly says the Myers are all about LGBT and BLM. Yeah. So I used to shop at Meyer. Now I shop at Walmart. Not that the Waltons are the greatest either, but that's
they're a bunch of leftists too. Yeah.
Well, you got to pick your battles.
Yeah.
And sometimes the more important thing also is that the targets get the message.
Yeah.
So Jamie Thompson says the so-called conservative PACs are endorsing anti-gun candidates. It must stop. Candidates need to stop taking their endorsements and money. Yeah, that's another thing that, I mean, obviously the NRA is a well-known organization, but a lot of times these groups are not even real. Like, I remember when Gary Glenn was running for state senate, the utility monopolies were attacking him, and they made up a group called Faithful Conservatives for Michigan, which was, of course, nothing of the sort. It was just a financial clearinghouse for their money through Eric Doster's law office. So that kind of stuff just happens all the time.
Yep.
Richard Head asks, out of the gubernatorial candidates, who would you say is the most pro A or most pro 2A? I don't know, Brenden, do you have any thoughts on the governor race?
Well, what I can say is that all of the Republican candidates for governor returned our survey 100%. I'm trying to think of the candidates. Ryan Kelly has spoken very loudly in support of constitutional carry, as has Garrett Soldano, as has Tudor Dixon. And actually, Kevin Rinke has it on his campaign site too. Ralph Rebant just returned his survey today. I've seen several of them in recent weeks come out in opposition of red flag laws, which is good because supporting constitutional carry is great. It's a good campaign issue. That's why they're running on it. Hint, hint, Republicans, get it done. But opposing red flag laws, that's a litmus test for the gun rights community now. If you can't be right on red flag, you shouldn't. You're not going to get the vote of the gun rights community, or you shouldn't get the vote of the gun rights community. I mean,
Right.
that's how grievous these laws are. But you have so many Republicans. You know, when red flag laws first started becoming the new soup du jour of the gun control world, you know, they thought they had their silver bullet. Oh well, we found our way to get guns out of the hands of dangerous people while respecting the Second Amendment. But once you start peeling back that onion, you realize that the core is rotten.
Yeah.
And it stinks.
That leads to another point about the red flag bill too, because we've been talking a lot about, the red flag element of it, but there's another thing in there too. There's like $15 billion in spending. Some of that was for the red flag bribery. Another big part of it was for, and this is what supposedly was what the Republicans were calling for, was more mental health wellness something or other, which sounds good, but in actual practice, what it typically means is funding left-wing psychologists, psychiatrists.
Yes.
And this is not the root cause of these school shootings, folks. It's our rotten culture, and it's our rotten social media environment, public school environments, the product of these radical leftists in the classrooms. And they're doing everything they can to take the focus away from that, away from the failings of the schools, both in terms of security issues and in terms of what they're teaching kids. And of course, the mental health industry itself, getting all these kids hopped up on, Ritalin and all these other psychological drugs isn't the greatest thing for them either. Yeah. Not to mention the collapse of the family, the church environment, the lockdown certainly didn't help. All of these things. I mean, this is a cauldron that our government has been brewing for a long time. And to see these Republicans say that their part of it in the compromise deal is giving more money to the left is something that also should be called out. Because I think we need to remember Howard Phillips's old slogan, defund the left. Because that's what the Republicans just can't seem to do. They love growing government, and they don't even realize who they're funding. Yeah. So Jane Locke says, here in the 22nd Senate District, Betsy DeVos and her clan are on a rampage against Detmer. DeVos is endorsing Tyson McBroom against Trump-endorsed candidates. Yeah, that's often the way the establishment works, is they'll always endorse incumbents. And of course, that's why we have the opposing attitude. We'll be putting out our incumbent report card later this week, and we'll be scoring them on a whole number of things. So any gun rights bills we can find among them, although for the most part, they've been just ignoring their responsibilities entirely.
Yeah, well, that's where you're talking about the trying to get the vote on constitutional carry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
So tell us the story. Tell us about
yeah,
this. This
yeah.
just
So this
happened
was
recently.
this couple weeks back. I've been talking with Representative Stephen Cara for a few weeks about trying to see if we can get constitutional carry to the floor. I met with House leadership staff. I met with other representatives, and talked about how this is a good issue. We need to get the whole House on the record on constitutional carry. This is not a fringe issue. We've got 25 states. Indiana and Ohio are bordering us now. Constitutional carry passed out of the Michigan House back in 2017, but since then, uh, they're afraid to touch it. And of course, this is the Lansing bubble, as you know. I mean, the Lansing bubble doesn't actually know what's happening outside of Lansing. They just do what they want to do, and they talk about whatever they want, and it's not actually usually based in reality. Um, but Steve Cara filed a motion to discharge from the Judiciary Committee constitutional carry, Bo Lefebvre's constitutional carry bill package. Um, Judiciary Committee is chaired by Richard. I completely agree. We're working on repealing registration as well with Matt Maddock and Tom Barrett. We got bills filed on both those issues. Sorry, side tangent, but we're working
Yep.
on that too. Um,
And by the way, Brenden, whenever you read the chat, feel free to read who it is and what they're saying, because the folks on YouTube don't see the Facebook chats, and
Yeah.
vice versa, and same for
Yeah,
Rumble.
sure. Yeah, no, Richard was talking about how constitutional carry is great and all, but I would love to have pistol registration repealed as well. I mean, that's another issue. It passed the Michigan House back in 2012, was gutted by the Senate in 2012 on its way to the governor's desk. It was on the path to be repealed, and then it got watered down. And then, of course, it was Snyder who wanted it watered down, and Richardville was the governor, or was the Senate leader at the time, who signed off on it. But anyways, there's legislative rules each chamber is governed by, and we went to the rule book and found that you can file a motion to discharge a bill from committee to bring it to the floor for consideration. It's actually a right that's protected by the Michigan Constitution too, the right to discharge a bill from committee. And for the last two legislative sessions, Graham Filler has stuffed constitutional carry, and ultimately it's the speaker. It was Lee Chatfield, and now it's Jason Wentworth, who sent it to that committee to die. It goes to Bo Lefebvre's committee, gets the song and dance, and then gets passed to another committee, and then it goes there and it dies. So
Graham Filler, by the way, was also hostile to our campus free speech legislation. He is terrible.
Yeah, and he almost lost that district, which he had no business losing during, was it the 2020 cycle or 2018 cycle? I can't remember now, but that is a safe Republican district, and he underperformed there. But so Steve Cara goes to make the motion. You have to file a motion the day before, and then the day of the motion, we make it absolutely clear that we want a recorded vote on this. Steve requests a recorded vote, and they had decided that the motion was dead before anyone even got up that morning. And this is how the Michigan House operates. Everything is scripted. Nothing delineates from the script. If anyone tries to delineate from the script, they get a slap across the wrist for being a bad Republican. And sadly, it was a chaotic day. There are pro-abortion activists who are just trying to shut down the House's business that day. But Steve Cara stood alone. I know that there were other people, other representatives that I spoke with who were ready to go. It might have been too hard for them to hear. But I think that for so long, representatives and conservatives have been trained to do just what leadership tells you to do.
Yeah.
And that's the problem in Lansing, is that too many conservatives go to Lansing just to go along to get along and just to go there to vote right. That's not enough. You have 6 years with our term limits to do there. And if all you're doing is just to go there to vote right, you're wasting your time. You actually need to try to change the culture. And that's what Steve Cara tried to do. He tried to change the culture by forcing this vote. We didn't get our vote, but we exposed legislative tyranny. It was actually great to see a journalist from the Free Press picked up on what we were trying to do. He wrote it down that Steve Cara knew the rules. He appealed the ruling of the chair. He went through everything, and actually he caught leadership off guard by it, and they're very mad about it afterwards. You could tell just by looking at their faces how frustrated. And there's another one where Ben Frederick was chiding Steve Carl. These are your elected representatives. These rules exist so that they can move legislation for you.
Yeah, we I think need to start pressuring our lawmakers about this too. This has been a long-term problem in the legislature. I remember when, and by the way, I think part of it also is because of term limits. And I'm not saying I'm against term limits. I think there's pluses and minuses on both sides, but one of them is that these lawmakers don't find their footing with dealing with leadership in 3 short terms. But at any rate, though, I think also part of that is we need some public pressure on this. But I remember when Rep. Riley first got elected, and we were talking about, we met with Tom Leonard, who was like the most caucus-friendly speaker that we've ever had in terms of, being open and willing to work with everybody and not wanting to lay his iron fist down over the caucus. But he would, even he said when it came to like amendments and things and floor maneuvers like that, well, if we did that, then the Democrats would do that all the time too. Okay, well, vote them down. What's the big deal? But no, also, by the way, on Rumble, Grey Wolf says, I'd like to know which gubernatorial candidates would refuse the federal money for red flag laws. So I don't know if we have details on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And now that, now that we got federal gun control, thanks Republicans, that may be something we need to go back and revisit. If anyone comes across any of the gubernatorial candidates at various events across the state, get an opportunity to ask them. Let me know what they say.
Yeah, and there is a gubernatorial debate coming up on Thursday, folks. So if you want, find out. I don't remember off the top of my head, but in the chat, if you guys know, please remind me which organization is hosting that debate this Thursday. You can reach out to them and ask them. Ask them would they refuse federal funding for red flag laws. And by the way, side note, I'll also mention this. We covered the last governor's debate, the one on Mackinac Island recently. And Tudor Dixon gave a very peculiar answer that suggested she might have something she's not talking about on her immigration policy. So feel free to pass that one along to them as well, that none of these candidates have really been vetted on what their immigration policy is either. Stephen Ghostley says, Brighter Michigan PAC is the host of that event. I wonder who they're connected to. The name does not ring a bell.
These PACs, they're just a dime a dozen, and it's like they have words in a bag they just pull out and put it together.
Yeah, and usually because they're concealing, who's really behind them.
Yeah.
Super PAC. Let's see. I'm just looking at their website right now to see if anything can kind of tip me off. Here we go. Yeah, Eric Castilia. He's the. Well, I guess there's some legal dispute about this, whether or not he's the chair of the Macomb County GOP. But it looks like, this is a Macomb County event. So I'd assume the Macomb County GOP would probably be the best people to get in touch with about this. So there you go. You can look up Brighter Michigan PAC and you can find their information there. It looks like they've got a Facebook page and a YouTube channel as well. Steven says it's in Warren. So there you go. All right, folks. Well, it's almost 10 o'clock, and I know, Brendan, you did not want to go much longer than an hour. I think we've covered a lot of stuff up to this point anyway. But just to return, a couple of things. First off, before you start closing the show out, folks, if you like this kind of content, and really, where else on any of these social platforms do you see people talking about the real nuts and bolts of politics? Come on, give us a like, give us a share, a thumbs up. All those things help the algorithm, help get the word out about this, because there's a lot of quote unquote political channels out there, but they're really just mainstream news sources or people covering us from an observer's mentality, people that don't understand fighting to pass legislation at the state level and fighting to hold politicians accountable. So if you haven't already done so, if you care about the Second Amendment, make sure you go to greatlakesgunrights.org, get on their email list. Obviously, Brendan's a fellow traveler, but gun rights are not the number one issue at Rescue Michigan. And that's just the way organizations are. We can only take on so many at once. So for everything about gun rights, be sure to sign up at greatlakesgunrights.org and gunrights.org, the National Association for Gun Rights, for federal alerts as well. And with that, I want to return to something we talked a little bit about last night, and I want to get your take on this as well, because we were talking about holding politicians accountable. And obviously, when you have a primary challenge, that's an easy way to go, to vote against the incumbents, support a challenger, support someone that fills out the surveys 100%, someone that's saying the right things, making the right promises, and competing against someone that's broken our trust. But one of the things I brought up last night is, here in Michigan, it's easy to oppose Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters, our Democrat U.S. senators. But what do you do if you're in South Carolina and your U.S. senator is Lindsey Graham? What do you do if you're in Pennsylvania and your senator is Pat Toomey? Your last senator was Arlen Specter, and your next nominee is going to be Mehmet Oz, who supports red flag laws and a whole bunch of other left-wing issues. What do you do then? And I was encouraging people, look, folks, you have to deny them your vote. I'd say as grassroots leaders, you can't encourage your friends to vote Democrat just to vote them out because they're not going to understand. But there's third-party alternatives, and you know what? You can leave one part of the ballot blank. But when you give the rhinos your vote, you're encouraging them to just keep doing the same thing because they know no matter how bad they are, they're going to get away with it because you're on their reservation. But I don't know, Brenden, would you concur with that, or what do you think about it?
Yeah, I concur with that. And you and I are from the same orbits. And what I'll say is that obviously the higher up you go in the offices, that's a harder pill to swallow. For president, for Senate. But people make this excuse for town board, voting for a rhino for town board. You have to, it's the point that I made earlier. If you vote for politicians who are consistently voting against you on policies that you care about, all because they have a R next to their name, you are literally giving a misbehaving child a cookie. You are saying, you know what, you can vote against me, you can take away my rights, but you've got the R next to my name, next to your name. I'm just going to keep voting for you. And this is how. You want to know why you have 15 Republicans in the Senate voting for gun control? Is because people just
from Alaska and Indiana, no less.
Yeah, Alaska, Indiana, Texas, South Carolina.
Yeah.
It's because people are just voting for Republicans because they have the R next to their name. And in a state like South Carolina, how is Lindsey Graham still a senator there is only because of people unwilling to withhold their vote from a really, really bad Republican.
Yeah. And look, folks, in Georgia, 2 lousy Republicans lost their U.S. Senate races in 2020, in part because of disrespecting Trump, but there was other reasons too. And we got 2 left-wing lunatics in the U.S. Senate in Georgia, but they're going to get replaced when the next election comes around. And if they're and think of it this way too, if Peter Meyer loses to a Democrat, well, whose fault is it if the Republicans lose majority by 1 single seat? The whole country is not your responsibility. You can only control what happens in your own district.
They'll blame it on conservatives, but it's the funny thing about that, Adam, is that it's not actually funny. The establishment does this to conservatives all the time.
Yes, they do. Yep.
It's just too often conservatives buy the line from the establishment that you have to be a good Republican and you have to vote for the lesser of 2 evils.
Yeah. And the biggest example of this was Donald Trump. You would think the Republican, as a grassroots leader, as a grassroots activist, you have no required loyalty to any given candidate. If you're a party official, though, maybe you do. But look what happened when Trump was the Republican nominee in 2016. And the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, refused to endorse him. The governor of Michigan, Rick Snyder, refused to endorse him. They were happy to help Hillary lose. So they practice what they preach, they don't practice what they preach when it comes to the lesser of 2 evils stuff. From their perspective, they'll attack us. They'll give away seats to Democrats. The DeVos family gave away the seat to Carol Glanville just because they were mad that R.J. Regan beat their preferred candidate in the primary. And you got to show that same toughness, folks. Because the reality is, if there's a red tsunami coming November, then 1 or 2 seats doesn't matter. What matters is if we don't hold our politicians accountable, they don't listen to us because they know at the end of the day, we're going to just hold our nose and vote to reelect them. And that's how we get to what Reggie in the chat just called the uniparty. So, all right, folks. Well, we're a little bit past the hour here. Brenden, if there's anything else you want to plug or promote, now is the time. Richard Head says, I just need to find a list of the most pro-gun candidates for state house and state senate, both of which are up in my district. So, Brendan, do you guys have a candidate survey program out? Have you done a candidate survey yet?
We do. We don't post ours publicly because we don't like giving our enemies free information like that. That's my view on it anyways. But you can shoot me an email, Richard, at director@greatlakesgunrights.org, and I'd be happy to let you know where your candidates stand on that issue.
Well, there you go, folks. Yeah, we did post our candidate survey results, although we didn't survey them on guns. We just surveyed them a bunch of other things. But yeah, it was funny. After we posted those results, we got a few extras coming in late.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You want to be on record now.
Yeah.
But they will be on record, and we will certainly be holding any of them accountable if they break their word to us once in office. And we will definitely focus on them in the upcoming cycle if we need to. So, all right, folks. Well, thanks again for tuning in on this Monday stream. We have all of our streams on the Rescue Michigan website, rescuemichigan.org. It usually takes a day or two for them to post, but of course you can see them also on each of our channels, except YouTube. YouTube, we've had some problems with their posts getting taken down, but they're all easy to find on our Rumble page. And of course, again, folks, if you like this kind of content, be sure you like and share and subscribe. And Reggie says, people, give these guys some dough. Yes, I'm shouting. Thank you, Reggie. And folks, yeah, Great Lakes Gun Rights is great work. Rescue Michigan Coalition, we are looking for your support to be able to hold more politicians accountable. We will be putting as many pieces in the mail, as many texts and phone calls as we can make, in as many key seats as we can target. And of course, once again, folks, I'm going to put it up on the screen one more time. Don't forget about Lucas. He really does need our support. It is crunch time. His trial is in 2 weeks. So do everything you can to show him your support. By the way, that does not mean picketing at the courthouse or anything like that. Don't do anything like that. But we'll let you know what we find out about getting the trial live streamed. And again, here is where you can find the form to ask the court for permission to stream the event. We do have a cameraman lined up, so you don't need to actually do that, but you do want to do everything just to file the form to put the notice on the court that there's a lot of people here in the public that are calling for their right to witness these proceedings. So, all right, folks. Again, Brenden, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Adam.
Keep up the good fight. And until next time, folks, probably see you on Sunday. Well, I'm sure we'll see you on Sunday. Maybe on Thursday. We're still going to figure out the mechanics of if we can do a live viewing of the gubernatorial debate that's coming up this Thursday. So stay tuned, folks. And as always, thanks again for all you guys do for liberty. Till next time. Peace out.